Black Gay Men's Blog talks black gay men, depression, and mental health with mental health advocate and author Malcolm Varner. So, welcome to Black Gay Men's Blog, Malcolm Varner.
Well, thanks for being here. I'm glad to be here.
And thank you for contacting me to discuss black gay men, community, and mental health. If you could just tell us briefly, who you are and why you decided to contact the blog.
Sure. Well, again, my name is Malcolm Varner, and basically, I am, when it comes to mental health work, I see myself as an advocate for people who are living with a mental illness. As someone who was initially diagnosed with depression in college and later on with bipolar disorder in graduate school, I've gone through a number of ups and downs since those points of time, and I'm now in a position where I have a lot of stability under me, and I just devoted myself to making sure that I'm an advocate when it comes to mental health concerns overall. And so that's what I do, in my free time, in addition to writing. But professionally, I work in the field of HIV prevention.
Okay, cool. Now, going back to what you just said, because I know I had read a bit about you. You were diagnosed in college with clinical depression, and then how many years after that were you diagnosed with bipolar 2? And for those who don't know, can you just explain to them what it is? Because I think a lot of us have this idea, especially when you say, people think they know what depression is, but then when you say bipolar, sometimes some of us think, oh, you're crazy, or it's some kind of thing that it's not. So I would just want you to tell us, what it is.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I was diagnosed, let me see, with major depressive disorder after my sophomore year in college, during the summer of 2002, if I'm not mistaken, 2003, the summer of 2003. And then I was diagnosed with bipolar type 2 disorder in graduate school, which would have been, 2007. So, 3 to 4 years afterwards.
3 to 4 years afterwards. Right, okay. Now, so what can you tell us bipolar disorder 2?
Yeah.
What is that?
Okay, well, there are 3 types when of bipolar disorder. There's type 1, which is most associated with, what comes to mind when you think of someone who's been bipolar, with very extreme highs of mania, and also very extreme lows, going into periods of episodes of major depression.
Right.
Bipolar type 2, which is characterized by having severe lows, so leaning towards the depression side, but also some minimal highs.
So you have the milder, what is it called, hypomania?
Exactly.
Right.
And to the milder side, exactly.
Milder side. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. I just wanted to be clear on that because I hear so many times people, when you say someone is bipolar, they have this impression that it means, that it means you're totally insane and you can't work and you're just like a raving lunatic. So I just want to make sure we make that clear that, that's not what it is.
Right. And I think what you're getting at right there just deals with, a lot of stigma, that we have in the community overall. When it comes to people who have mental illness, oftentimes they're, deemed crazy,
yes,
or those sorts of things, when, most folks are just regular folks, really.
Yeah. Now, as, black people, well, purposes of this interview, we're looking more in terms of the LGBT community, but I think the black community as a whole, we seem to have a problem dealing with and talking about mental health issues. Has that been your experience? And what can you say to people to kind of encourage us to be more open, especially those who might have mental health issues?
Right. That's a great question, and I would definitely have to say that my experiences, in terms of just experiencing some of the use from pretty much the time when I was in probably high school, and maybe even as early as in junior high school, and being formally diagnosed later on. I think that there is a lot of just people not being familiar with some of these clinical aspects in terms of mental illnesses, and so and just the stigma that's out there. So as African Americans, those are areas where we find ourselves not being very comfortable
Right.
with those things. And a lot of that has to do with our faith tradition and whatnot in terms of just prayer and believing that there's certain things we need to just put in the hands of God
Right.
and sort of leave alone, or that we can be prayed out of. And also, just overall, as being African Americans, in terms of our access of many health care and medical services, we don't deal with things,
Right.
as much as our white counterparts, let's say. And so, in terms of seeking treatment or just more education along the lines, we haven't got to that point fully.
Right.
And in terms of my own family, there is a lot of just silence around it. Everyone knows that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. However, there's just that silence and discomfort around it. I think a lot of folks see those illnesses are as being a character defect.
Right. So it's almost like it's taboo. We shouldn't even talk about that.
Right. Right.
Right. So now, as someone who, because you actually work in this field, so if you're saying, you work in this field, you were diagnosed with this, and it's not even really talked about in your family, how, does that affect you in any way? I mean, how does that, obviously now I'm sure you've had a bit of time to deal with it, but I'm thinking about someone out there who might be listening and going through the same thing, and the family doesn't want to discuss it. What would you say to that? I mean, how does it affect you, and what would you say to someone like that?
Right. So for someone who's in a similar situation, and their family isn't really open to those types of conversations, I would say that it's critical that people find other means of support.
Right.
And that's not to say that families cannot be supportive, because my family is really supportive of me in a lot of ways. However, that is to say that they need to find support systems that are going to help them with their diagnosis or dealing with some of the emotional or mood issues that they may have. And so whether that's counseling, whether those are friends who are comfortable listening and just being there, whether that's a support group, those sorts of things. In November, I'm going to be doing a support group through NAMI called Peer to Peer, and
Right.
so it's for people who are all diagnosed, and I'll be one of the co-facilitators of that group.
Oh,
And
cool.
so it will be helpful for the people who come to the group, me as well. And so and then making sure that if depending on where you are, you look into some of the resources that are out there that are community based, that may offer these services and different education forums and things like that, or in order for them to increase their knowledge, but also meet other people who may be experiencing similar issues.
Okay, cool. That's great. Now, just going back briefly to something you said about, because I think this is very important in the Black community, we have this great faith, which is a good thing. But I think going back to what you were saying, what I always say to people is, there's nothing wrong with prayer, but you need to be open if you have any issues, whether it's mental health, whether it's HIV, whether it's whatever it is, diabetes. You need to be open to doing, say, both using
Right.
prayer as well as getting the medication, which we're not always very good at seeking treatment.
Right.
So, is there anything you can say to, like, encourage people that it's okay, to get treatment? You don't just have to try and pray it away, because it probably won't go away.
So first, let me just say, I think you hit it on the spot. Certainly, I think, having sort of a diverse approach, a good spiritual life, in addition to the counseling and to the, medication, all those types of supports, I think are going to allow people to be more stable and healthier, if they have a balance of those. And so, what I would suggest, for people is to, at least, give them a try, with depression, and I know bipolar especially. Like, there are times where, it feels like this is, we don't need the therapy or the medication, but, that sort of manifests within the illness itself.
Right.
And so, it can be misleading sometimes because we don't maintain those levels of mania or those, great experience, those sort of hyper great moments, and they will wear away. And so, what I would suggest is just, having an understanding, of the diagnosis, and accepting that as something that, like diabetes, as you mentioned, or HIV,
Yeah.
are lifelong conditions. It's not the end of the world, and by using sort of those resources that are available in the form of therapy and in the form of medication, then, that's going to allow us to lead the most fulfilling and productive life.
Okay. I just thought about something. I want to, can we just talk about for, like, a couple of minutes or whatever, some of the symptoms of depression and bipolar disorder? Because I think with depression, a lot of us just say, I've heard us say, oh, well, everybody gets, down every now and then. But that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about being clinically depressed. It's not just being down, like, you're having a bad day. That's not what we're talking about. So can we just say, what really the symptoms actually are, so that people have a clearer understanding?
Okay. So, you're absolutely right. We all have, down days, or, rough days or rough patches that we go through. And that's more, situational depression. And that's pretty much expected. We suffer losses in life. People get laid off jobs, people lose family members, people break up out of relationships. So, those things are situational and to some extent to be expected. But, as far as like the clinical side of things, this is when you see, certain symptoms, which we'll talk about, are sort of manifested, for very long, for a long term, a long periods. And it's when those sort of become repetitive or reoccurring, and almost to some extent, like maybe you see patterns, of these symptoms. Then, there's cause, to look at whether or not there's something, more serious going on. And so, when it comes to depression, many of the symptoms, and, they're gonna look different for different people.
Right.
So, overeating, or oversleeping, overeating, or not eating, what one should. Same thing as sleeping and not sleeping enough or sleeping too much. That's something that I did a lot of, is just sleeping hours and hours, during the day, 12, 15 hours, is not uncommon for somebody, who may be depressed. And isolation, really a loss of interest, in activities, that usually, give a person energy. So if somebody was really into, music, then stepping back from that,
Right.
and not engaging in that anymore. So, withdrawal, from one's friends and one's social circles.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's really interesting is that for professionals, you know overworking
Oh
is one
yes.
of those areas
Mm-hmm.
that can also be a sign of depression,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a way for them to escape,
Right.
um, and not really deal with their reality, but
Mm-hmm.
they're compensating with all the hours that they're putting into work, and that can really be draining on the person.
Right.
And so the list really is
Goes on. What about with the mania, which I guess it's something I'm interested in, because I've often read and seen, firsthand. I think sometimes when people are having an episode,
Mhm.
a manic episode, they can actually be quite engaging and fun to be around.
Right.
I mean, I think it
Right.
can be like a really like fabulous time.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I think that maybe somehow because those kind of episodes for some people can seem to be fun,
Right. Right.
could that
And
dissuade them from maybe taking the meds? Because I mean, hey, this is a fun time.
you hit on exactly what I was about to say. Like, so for someone who, maybe, in a manic phase, you know, um, if they don't have a real good grips on their situation and on their diagnosis, then, taking medication is the last thing, that they're thinking about and concerned
Mm-hmm.
about, because of of just the energy that they have already. Um, and so, as far as like some of the symptoms, overspending,
Mm.
is definitely one of those. Just going out, after getting paid, or if you may have money saved up and just, splurging for no good reason, knowing that at the end of, that shopping trip, you may be broke, but, so splurging is
Mm.
one. Hypersexual behavior,
Yes.
is, another possibility in terms of how that may manifest. Staying up for long, during the night. So
Yeah.
at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or for people, who may be in that type one,
Right.
disorder classification, then they may stay awake for 1 or 2 or 3 nights, during the
Mm-hmm.
week, just because there's so much energy there. And so you really see, just uh, uh, you really see lots pouring out. Speaking fast, speaking very rapidly,
Mm-hmm.
is another way that sometimes it can manifest.
Okay, thank you. Now let's talk about specifically mental health as it relates to gay men and black gay men in
Yes.
particular, because
Yep.
I think that we have some additional layers, if you will, that
Mhm.
might contribute to mental health issues. So what would you say when it comes to black gay men and mental health? What are the kind of things that you think affect our mental health as, men of color or black gay men?
Okay. Well, first, let's just address the issue. We already acknowledged that within the black community, there's that pervasive stigma that's there when it comes to mental illness, already. So you package sexuality onto that,
Mm-hmm.
for us black gay men, and so now we're dealing with, um, the taboo, of being black and gay.
Right.
And so that's one of the dynamics that we often have to face,
Mm-hmm.
because for many within the community, that's something that's unapproachable, or that's something that unapproachable, excuse me, and that not many people are accepting of. And um, there's, I mean, so being in the closet, and dealing with, mental health issues, can add a lot. Um, in addition, to that, for some, populations, particularly economically disadvantaged populations,
Right.
um, it gets even worse because you add on not having the means to, pay for your own housing, or pay for, support services. I mean, services like medication, or going to your primary care physician, for instance. Then all of a sudden, there are a lot of immediate needs, that need to be focused on. And so, for us as Black gay men, um, it's important for us to recognize, just like we recognize our sexuality, this is something, that's a part of us. But as far as the mental health piece goes, we can do things to ensure that we get the best out of our health.
Okay. Now, as far as again sexuality goes, gay men, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, are notorious for turning to certain substances, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever, as a way to cope with all the stress and all the anxiety of dealing with your sexuality, homophobia, all the kind of things that come in. Isn't it true that sometimes these substances can trigger or even complicate any existing mental health issues? Because I think sometimes we're kind of like very like, flippant about this. You go out, you party, you drink, you smoke, you do this, you do that. But I often think if you have any underlying mental health issues, that might complicate it, no?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. For someone who may have, a mental illness or a mental health diagnosis, certainly adding on, substances um, in such a way where they're, not being controlled, and they take control over you, is really going to complicate, the issue. And and in the field, we talk about there being co-occurring disorders, and so that's, basically what you're speaking to. The combination of mental illness, mental illness, as well as substance abuse addiction. Is a really almost lethal combination, if you will. And so for people who get there, really both issues need to, both issues really need to be addressed. As far as, the addiction, as well as, the underlying mental health issue.
Okay, cool. Are you familiar with there was a recent study, I think University of Michigan, about saying that, men who reported higher levels of, I think they called it homo negativity, which is like shame and disapproval of their, same gender orientation, were more likely to be depressed or suffer from, depression and anxiety. I don't know if you read about that study. And what would you say to people? Because I think, especially in our community, it's definitely kind of can be related, because a lot of us have a lot of shame when it comes to our sexuality, and I think that can definitely affect, one's mental health. So, is there anything you can say to people out there to kind of encourage them to maybe deal with this some sort of way, or have you have any experience with it, whether work or personal, you want to share with us?
Was Dr. Graham
Yes,
the principal investigator of that study?
yes.
Okay, yeah. So I did read about that a little, and so what I would say is, at the end of the day, all of us want to be, I believe, have a fundamental desire to sort of be our authentic selves, whatever that may be. And I think a part of that involves acceptance. And so, to speak to sort of that study, you were mentioning, and what some Black gay men, have experienced. So if we're dealing with just being Black in a predominantly, just being Black in a predominantly, white environment, where we still have to deal with, issues of racism, and you add on homophobia, within the larger community and within our community, where it's really hard for us to find acceptance because of the religious beliefs there. Um, then it can be challenging for gay black men to
Yeah.
really just be at a place where we can find acceptance and be who we are and be our authentic selves anywhere we go. Um, we black people tend to live in predominantly black communities. That's not always the case,
Yeah.
but it's generally true. And so, if black gay men, we have very few spaces, particularly for us in midtown or smaller cities, to congregate. Outside of the, in terms of clubs and wherever else may people may, wherever else people may be going. If we don't have very many places, then then it seems expected that a lot of times we're gonna encounter issues and discrimination and factors that are gonna make us um, feel worse about ourselves.
Let's move on to talking about HIV and mental health because I think there's some kind of correlation. It's like HIV positive people, I think it's what, twice as likely or something like that to be depressed, but also people with depression and other mental health issues are also have a higher incidence of HIV infection. So as black gay men, and we all know the rates of HIV so high in our community, I think this is something we really have to talk about because there are obviously a lot of us that are HIV positive, which means to me there must be a lot of us that are depressed, at least apart from other mental health issues. So what can you say about that?
Um, well, I don't have all the facts and figures,
Hmm.
back to back me up, but in terms of there being a correlation, I think that's quite obvious, and that does need to be looked into more. And so, when it comes to HIV, something that is completely avoidable and does not have to be spread from one person to the next at this stage because of what we know about the virus, because of the resources that are available to help prevent the transmission of HIV. We're at a place where we can really empower ourselves a lot more. But for some reason, we're not getting it as black gay men, particularly young black gay men,
Right.
Ages 13 to 29. 48% increase from 2006 to 2009, according to the CDC. And so, we have to do something that really empowers us, I think, as a people. And when I say people, I mean black gay men. For us to begin loving ourselves, for us to begin accepting ourselves, for us to be able to love each other and encourage each other, because the wider community, unfortunately, is not giving that to us.
No.
And um, and so there's that community aspect, but there's that individual aspect too. And so, and I think that's where the mental health, piece comes in. There is is if people are in a place where they feel valued and they can value themselves, and I think that's most important. Where they are able to value themselves, then they're going to put themselves in compromising, situations where they're vulnerable, to things then that they may not otherwise want in their lives, if they were thinking from a more healthy standpoint, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. Now, what don't you think that maybe we should? I mean, I know it might be wishful thinking, but I think sometimes you just have to say things because there might be someone listening and it might resonate with them. Don't you think that we should be a little bit more accepting and understanding? Because we're already black, that's already one thing, and then you add gay, and then you add HIV. mental health, that seems like a lot. So if you, for those of us who know people, you know someone, okay, who's HIV positive or who might have mental health issues or both, don't you think that black gay men need to be a little bit more accepting and understanding of one another and the things that we might be going through?
Mm. That's a very large question. And so, um, but from one point, I would say yes, but I think I'm a humanist, and
Hmm.
so from a humanist standpoint, that's something I feel that we all should be. We all should have a level of empathy,
Hmm.
towards each other, just by virtue of us being human and us
Hmm.
going through these common experiences, and none of us being perfect at the end of the day. Um, but to look at the issue, as you brought it up in terms of us as being black gay men, having us more to be for us to be more accepting, and empathetic towards one another.
Hmm.
Um, I ideally, yes,
Right.
yes.
Well, in
How
an ideal world, yes.
Yes, in an ideal world, I think is asking, well, how do we get there?
Right.
And I would say that it all starts with level self,
Hmm.
um, with us being able to authentically, just embrace who we are
Hmm.
in all of our complexities,
Right.
and all of our similarities as well, and say this is who I am,
Right.
to the next person. Because if we don't have that for ourselves, then it's really hard to pass that on. And so the more and more we're able to do that and help each other,
Hmm.
um, see value,
Right.
in each other,
Hmm.
then I think that's how we start to get there, as a community, as a collective. Um, More and more, though, I've been seeing like these campaigns.
Hmm.
There are these different, HIV prevention campaigns targeting black gay men.
Right.
I just saw something else on Facebook where it's all these images of black gay men, just doing their thing and being them authentic selves.
Yes.
And there's a Be Great sort of movement that I
Hmm.
think started out in Chicago,
Yes.
and there's a Facebook page here in Columbus about Be Great. And
Hmm.
so I've been seeing more and more like black gay men starting to sort of um, form a collective identity and celebrate that.
Hmm.
We're heading in a direction, and that we need to continue to do that more and more.
Oh yes, I would agree. I think we're heading in the right direction, which is very encouraging. It's very encouraging to see that. So now, say someone out there listening, watching this, reading the blog, whatever, sitting at home, depressed, and I mean not, oh, I'm having a bad day, in that dark hole, as I call it, what kind of advice would you give to them as far as trying to get help, seek help, or do something? What advice would you give to someone?
Right. Fantastic question.
Hmm.
First, I would let them know, you are loved, you're valued, you bring so much, to this world, more than you can think of, and so just know that. That's the first thing that I would say, because all of us, are here for a purpose. None of us are just here, out of accident, and so we all bring a sense of meaning, and that's important to know. So the next thing that I would say is that I would encourage that person, to find the strength somehow or another to reach out, to someone, in order to access services or supports that you need, in order to get through this moment. And this is the other thing, with depression, is that it's not always there.
Hmm.
Sometimes it may be a day, sometimes it may be a couple of days, but there are moments where you know um, we sort of get back to our usual selves.
Mm.
And so I think it's important to recognize that it, it, that we can get through those moments,
Mm.
um, and and that takes holding on, that takes talking to people,
Mm.
and sometimes you know what, that takes a 911 call, so
Okay.
that we don't do something crazy uh,
Mm-hmm.
to ourselves or to anyone else. And if it gets to that point, then that's what needs to be done. Um, and as embarrassing or as that experience it may be, if it helps you to get through that experience,
Mm-hmm.
that you can get back to your usual self, and move forward, then albeit that's what needs to be done.
Okay.
So that advice would be, to reach out, speak to a friend, a
Mm-hmm.
family member, somebody who's going to be able to listen to you. If necessary, calling 911, so that you can get that emergency access if it's needed. Um, and the other thing, because this has brought me a lot of encouragement, is finding something that you love to do
Mm-hmm.
in that. And for me, that's writing. And so using that talent, that strength that you have, and just pursuing it and using it to your advantage,
Mm.
because if it's something that you love to do, then when you're doing it, you're naturally going to feel better. Um, Getting there and doing it may be hard and may not be easy, but taking that step, once you do it, you'll benefit those results. You know, during that process.
Cool. I like the fact that you said, with depression, it's not always there. It's like, you have days where you feel fine, and then you have days where you might be depressed because a few months ago, I asked the question on the Black Gay Men's Blog Facebook page, would you date someone who was depressed, as in clinically depressed, and also would you date someone who was bipolar? And
What was the response?
there were a few responses, but I actually got more private responses by which people often do with me by, I am instead of posting. Depression, some people said no, some people were okay with it, but I think the general consensus with bipolar disorder was that that was more than most people were willing to
Mm,
take on board.
mm.
So I bring that up to say, what would you say to people, and how can you encourage those who might be diagnosed with bipolar disorder and having these issues with stigma as far as the dating game goes, like, because you seem quite dateable to me today right now, so
Tell it to one of my exes. So I did not expect that question.
I know.
But I would my encouragement to them would be the same encouragement that I would give to anyone else. And that is to simply be yourself.
Okay.
At the end of the day, um, that's all any of us can be.
Mhm.
Um, and so, in being yourself, strive to
Mhm.
be the best self that you can be. And that includes, being healthy.
Mhm.
But I also fundamentally believe, in being honest. And if people can't accept somebody because they have bipolar disorder, then that speaks more about that person than it does to the person who has the diagnosis. Um, and the same thing can be said of people who are living with HIV,
Mhm.
people who are of a different race,
Right.
people who are older than 40, whatever sort of issue we want to make. And that's not to say that being older than 40 is an issue. I was just saying it to just talk about how people exclude.
Mhm.
So and but I, that's my encouragement is to be yourself, take care of yourself,
Mhm.
and realize that some people are going to be able to accept that, and some people are
Some
not.
people
And for
not.
the people who are not, that's okay. As long as that they can, they're upfront about that, and if they're living in their truth, well. that's their truth. But I've dated, let me see, three guys who all knew, since my diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I dated three guys, and there were ups and downs during those relationships. But those three guys, um, I felt that they cared about me. We had good relationships. They weren't great. We're not still together, but um, but that was not the end. That was not the end all be all. For those three guys. And so there are people out there like that too.
Like that too. Okay, now before we wrap up, is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to say? Anything you feel we haven't covered?
That is a good question. Um, in closing, I guess I would just say, to anyone out there who may be, experiencing, mental health, and it may be really aggressive and they're just dealing with, trying to be hopeful or not. My bottom line sort of encouragement at the end of the day is to, for people to realize, what all of us have values, all of us bring something to the table, and we just need to get in touch with what it is that we bring to the table so that we can share it with the world. And so, and that can, that may mean that we're working through some stuff, but in the end, all of us, all, the 7+ billion people here on this earth, all of us are working through, our issues. And so, as long as we work through it, then we're working through something. So, my encouragement is for folks to stay in the game, and share what it is, that they have, because we all have value.
Where can people find you, Malcolm Varner? Where can we find you?
Well, I reside here in Columbus, Ohio. I'm on Facebook, so Malcolm Varner, look me up. I have a website, which is malcolmvarner.com, and I also author two blogs. One is Living to Write and Writing to Live, and the other is My Brother's Keeper. Both of those can be found on blogger.com, and that's it. Or I do have one book on Amazon.com, which is my first poetry book, and it's called Looking Beyond the Storm: Selections of Poetry. So that is available, and that is it in a nutshell.
Okay, Malcolm Varner. Thank you very much. It's been great talking to you. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for sharing with us at BlackGayMensBlog. And, feel free anytime, come back, talk to us. We want to hear more from you whenever you're ready.
All right. And thank you for, the work that you're doing, for our community. We need positive outlets for us to, see what's going on, interact with each other. And so, that's, things like that are definitely needed in our community. So thank you too. And thanks for having me.
Thank you.